This package has 2 Golden Age #1 issues, but they're from the forgotten era of comic books. We're going to take a look. They're both from DC, and we're going to take a look at what books are here and the era when they came out. Up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. Before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, and follow us on other social media. Everything's in the description of this video. My Instagram, my whatnot, my eBay store, my email. I appreciate everybody that has followed the show and everything. So I bought these 2 books off of Sleeping Giant on Whatnot, and it's not often you see these kinds of books on Whatnot, but I got some really good deals. And one of them was a book that was on my my want list. The other was a book but it wasn't high on my want list, but I couldn't pass up the deal. And the other was a book I just grabbed. They're about a year apart, but we'll look at kind of where they sit in comic book history and what important role they take on. So, and we'll compare the 2. So hopefully the 2 books came through the shipping process successfully. So in a nice priority mailer. I've had trouble getting this larger size mailer, the one that is 14.875 inches. That has been a challenge lately, because I order through USPS and it's all free, but I've been getting the smaller ones, and I really can't use those to ship slabs because they're just a little too small. Like the smaller ones are these. So this is pretty good, a box within a box. But the problem is these don't really close so well when these are only 11 and a half. These are even a little bit smaller. So let's take a look at the books. Nice bubble wrap. Better than when I've gotten books and mailers. I'm just going to run through this as I pull the tape off the bubble wrap because that's a sound that most people don't enjoy. And then we'll get into the books. My first book here it's a CBCS book. And I have to see if these are worth resubmitting. This one probably less so, but oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that when I bought it. And it is a copy of Congo Bill #1 in a 4.0 off-white to white pages. This is a Nick Cardy cover. Nick Cardy's covers from the early 70s are pretty popular. He did Teen Titans for a while. So this is a really cool Nick Cardy cover. It's Congo Bill with Janu the Jungle Boy. In this issue, the Golden Gorilla, Queen of the Jungle, Chota the Chimp. The only thing that, this, I don't know if that's been cleaned or pressed, but first Congo Bill in his own title. So let's talk a little bit about Congo Bill. Congo Bill was a character who premiered in DC's Golden Age. And actually, I want to... his first appearance, what was his first appearance? I think it was in More Fun Comics. Hold on. So Congo Bill had his first appearance. Unfortunately, he's not on the cover. I guess that's Congo Bill, right? Is that Congo Bill? I guess Jano the Jungle Boy is, I guess, I haven't read a lot of these tales. And he premiered in More Fun Comics number 56 in 1940. I was kind of overshadowed by the fact that it's the second appearance of Dr. Fate and Dr. Fate's first cover appearance. He then, very shortly after that, went over to Action Comics and had a long run in Action Comics. His origin was in Action Comics 37 in 1941, pre-war golden age. In 1948, he had a movie serial and was one of these kind of prototypical characters of pulp / golden age comics. The white man in Africa, the Jungle Jim was another one of them, and of course Fiction House had those popular jungle comics, jumbo comics, but they more geared themselves toward like the good girl art aspect of the things. Now, I believe this is the first issue of it. Has the Golden Gorilla. Now, Congo Bill lasted for a long time. In Action Comics, I believe it was 267. It's the first appearance of Congo-rilla, who's a golden gorilla, and in keeping up with the times of Silver Age superheroing, Congo Bill had a ring that enabled him to transfer his consciousness into the gorilla. But when Bill's consciousness was in the gorilla, Congo Bill had to be in the cage. So with the gorilla's consciousness, you're going to escape. It's kind of weird. But actually, James Robinson brought him back for the Justice League run in approximately 2010. So Congo Bill / Congo-rilla has been around for a very long time. And it is pretty cool to get this #1. Now, the next book I got here. So I think I bought that first one for $100, right? Is that right? Oh, that got cut off. I have to, no, yeah, $100. And then I guess plus shipping. So then they pulled out another book and I couldn't resist. Now I'm pretty good at controlling myself when it comes to bidding on auctions. And my wife was talking to me about something. We were like bidding on something. She kept saying, "Oh, bid more, bid more, bid more." And I'm like, it was like a local school-based auction, and there's a whole backstory to it, but which isn't important here at all. But then the next day she's like, "Yeah, you kept bidding. You don't you do that when you?" I'm like, "No, I control myself." So this particular book, I had done a list earlier this year that had this comic on it because it's a triple key. It's actually a quadruple key. It's an issue #1, and it is a little bit lower grade, and I don't know if it's upgradable. I'm not concerned about that right now. I just like to have this in my PC. But what is the book? It's Brave and the Bold #1. And this is a DC comic from 1955. And it's the first appearance of 3 characters: the Golden Gladiator, the Viking Prince, and the Silent Knight. Robert Kanigher and France Heron stories, Joe Kubert, Russ Heath, and Irv Novick cover and art, Jerry Grandinetti art. So I'm going to guess that I believe, if I remember this correctly, I'm pretty sure Kubert did Viking Prince. I'm not sure Heath and Novick, which one did Golden Gladiator, which one did Silent Knight. But it's a 3.5 off-white to white. Does have a little bit of a stain there. It's odd, has this little hole punch up here. But this is the previous sale of this book was in a $600 for a 3.5. And so the Sleeping Giant started this at $300, which I couldn't resist that. And then somebody else started bidding on it. And I had a plan, which I stuck to. So I'm going to say, so what I was saying as we were bidding in $10 increments, I'm like, I'm going to, it's sort of like reading a poker table, reading your opponents. I said, I'm going to go with the theory that he's going to go up to 400 because people have this habit of having like round numbers they're going to bid to. So I said, I'll go to 410. And if he wants to go above that, I'll stop and I can pass on it. Sure enough, he bid 400. I bid 410. And that was it. and I got the book. And I'm really happy to have this. This is definitely, both of these are PC books. And I'm a DC guy. So to have this, and I've kind of low-key been collecting Brave and the Bold issues when I see them, or I have them in collections. So I'm kind of working on the run, and I'm missing the biggest issue of the run, which is 28, the first Justice League of America, which I should get because I'm a big Justice League guy. Let's just refocus. But I have the first Hawkman. I need the first Suicide Squad, which is another big issue. But in Brave and the Bold, so Brave and the Bold, most people remember it as a Batman team-up series, but it had these characters, and I believe the Golden Gladiator was replaced by Robin Hood. I think that coincided with DC getting the Robin Hood book from Quality Comics. They canceled Robin Hood and put him in Brave and Bold. And these characters, these historical action heroes, remained the focus of the book through what issue was it? Issue 24. Then it became a tryout book similar to Showcase. 25, 26, 27, Suicide Squad. 28, 29, 30, Justice League. 31, 32, 33, Cave Carson. 34, 35, 36, Hawkman. And then Suicide Squad came back for 3 issues. Then Cave Carson had another run. Then Hawkman. 45 through, what was it? 40. I'm looking at it. 45 through 48. No, 45 through 49 were Strange Sports Stories. And then it started the team-ups. And the first team-up in Brave and the Bold, number 50, was Green Arrow and the Martian Manhunter. And then it was Aquaman and Hawkman. And then there were 3 Battle Stars, which was really a team-up, Atom and Flash. And then 54 is the first Teen Titans. Metamorpho had his first appearance in 47. The full Teen Titans in issue 60. And then they did a couple issues with Starman and Black Canary. And the first Batman team-up was 59 with Green Lantern. And then they went to Teen Titans next issue. And then Batman came back with Eclipso in 64. There were a couple more team-ups of other characters. And then Batman teamed up with the Flash in 67 and stayed around until the final issue of the series, issue number 200. So first issue of a long-running DC series. Very happy to have this. But what I looked at was, I was looking at the 2 books. Now, there is something to compare these. So these represent what I call a kind of forgotten period in DC history. Now, one thing you may notice, these books came out exactly 1 year apart. Congo Bill is cover dated August, September 1954, and Brave and the Bold is cover dated August, September 1955. And I don't know, what do you notice one main thing that's different because of the time period? Well, it's the Comic Code Authority stamp, right? The Comics Code Authority came into play in earlier in mid-1955. But DC wasn't really affected because DC wasn't doing the kind of horror that obviously EC was, and Harvey and even Atlas. So they were not really affected by the Comics Code. And when you look at the books that DC was publishing during this time period, they had a lot of different titles, and many of them were very long-running titles. So I want to take a quick look at the DC books from 54 and 55, the books that came out in that 1 year in between the titles that DC was publishing, which is kind of interesting. So let's jump into that. Now, DC was still publishing those characters, those superhero characters that survived from the Golden Age. And these titles, with one exception, were all titles that began in the early 1940s and lasted well into the 1980s. Some of them in the 70s. But Action Comics, which starred Superman, Wayne Boring was the key artist at the time. There was Adventure Comics, which had Superboy as its lead feature. And Adventure Comics lasted until the 1980s. It lasted just over 500 issues. And then you had Detective Comics, which starred Batman. And at this point in time, the backup was Powwow Smith, Indian Lawman. It would be a couple more years before John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, became the backup of Detective Comics. And then, of course, Batman had his own series, and it was in June of 55 that we got the first appearance of Ace the Bat Hound. Superman had his own series, of course, that was running. Now, both of those, I believe, were bi-monthly at the time, where Action, Detective, Adventure were all monthly comics. Superboy had his own title, as did Wonder Woman. Sensation Comics had been canceled, but Wonder Woman kept her own title. Issue number 70 here in November of 54 was the first appearance of the Angleman. And then World's Finest Comics was had stories of both Superman and Batman, and it's here in issue 71, the July-August 1955 issue, which, and you can see here on the cover, featuring your two favorite heroes together in one adventure. Read what happens when Superman and Batman exchange identities. This is the first time in World's Finest that they teamed up, and that became the fixture at the time. Now, this, and you can see it goes down to 10 cents. So basically what they did was they published a lot of different stories. They had backup stories. So it was a 25-cent, and then I think it was a 15-cent book as it became, I think it was 68 pages. But what was it? Was it the month before that it would have changed? Yes, 68 pages for 15 cents the previous month. So they cut down the page count, and then rather than having separate Superman and Batman stories and a whole slew of backups, they just had one Superman Batman story. So those were the titles that continued to be published, and Aquaman and Green Arrow kind of piggybacked on those, and they were backups all during that time, and may remain backups in Adventure and World's Finest from the Golden Age into the Silver Age. Now, also at this time, this was right about the time that DC essentially sued Fawcett Comics into oblivion, contending that Captain Marvel was an infringement on their Superman trademark. Finally, Fawcett was suffering. Now, superheroes had been on the decline since the end of World War II, and most of the other publishers had stopped publishing superhero titles. And Marvel had fits and starts with their superheroes before coming back full-blown in the Silver Age with Fantastic Four #1. But at this time, superheroes were really on the decline. So DC was holding the fort with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superboy. And so what DC did was they acquired from Fawcett Comics Hopalong Cassidy. The first 92 issues of Hopalong Cassidy were published by Fawcett. And then DC picked it up and ran up until issue 135 in 1959. Hopalong Cassidy was a Western character who was in movies. And, the Westerns were quite popular at the time in the movies, and really in the B movies. There were a lot of these programmers, and other publishers had Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, Tim Holt, a lot of actors who had B Westerns. They were B movies, very much programmers. Usually they ran like an hour to an hour, 15 minutes for the film. And so that's what you got there. Now, DC also published a bunch of different types of comics at this time. And many of them were very long-running comics. Two that were based on Hollywood actors. One was The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, which ran for 40 issues through 1957. But then when in real life, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, the comedy team, broke up, the book became The Adventures of Dean Martin, and that ran all the way until 1971 for a total of 124 issues. Similar to that was The Adventures of Bob Hope, which ran for 109 issues from 1950 all the way to 1968. Now, funny little family story, according to Family Story. I have to confirm this with my uncle. supposedly my uncle's roommate at law school was Bob Hope's son. And there was a story where, Bob had sent his son a letter at one point saying, keep your nose to the grindstone, but not too close or it'll look like mine. So those were two comics that DC had based on Hollywood comedic actors / teams. Then they also had The Adventures of Rex the Wonder Dog. And that was a title that ran for 46 issues. And issue number 4 is the most well-known. That came out earlier in the 1950s. That's the first appearance of Detective Chimp. Now, there were war books they were publishing. All American Men of War, which ran for 117 issues all the way through 1966. Star Spangled War Stories, which ran for 204 issues from 1952 to 1977. And Our Army at War, which ran for 301 issues from 1952 to 1977 before becoming Sergeant Rock. He took over the book. Now, none of those popular characters were in the books at the time. I'm not sure. I'm not really familiar with these books, but I'm not sure if they were just anthology stories. It didn't seem like featuring Thunderbolt Tank. Is that a character in Star Spangled War? The Ballad of the Battling Bell. I'm not sure if any of these were features that ran. I'm sure they had them in each series. Now, DC had yet to, it was, I believe, either later in 55 or early in 56 that they acquired Quality Comics. So they did not yet publish Black Hawk, GI Combat, or Plastic Man, or the romance. Which was the romance book? Was it Heartthrobs? I think Heartthrobs was the romance book that they got from Fawcett. Now, they also had a bunch of comedy books. Some of them similar to Archie Comics. There was Buzzy. Buzzy ran 77 issues from 1945 to 1957. Here's Howie Comics, which ran, how many issues of Here's Howie were there? 18 issues from 52 to 54. Kind of maybe a Beetle Bailey type character. Leave It to Binky, which ran for 82 issues. It actually became just Binky in 1970, but all ran, and it fits and starts through the 70s. It ran all the way to 1982. So this ran into the Bronze Age. A Date with Judy, which ran 79 issues from 1947 to 1960. It was actually based, and you can see Television Radio's coast-to-coast favorite. It was based on a radio show, which became a television show. It was very common late 40s into early 50s for shows that were popular on radio to then transform into television shows, including soap operas. But Date with Judy also was a film in 1948, starring Jane Powell as Judy and Elizabeth Taylor as her nemesis, Wallace Beery played her father. So that does have some, and that's not the only book that DC had that had a movie adaptation. Everything Happens to Harvey, which ran for just 7 issues in 53 and 54. Very, very Archie like. And then they had the Funny Animals, and they had a lot of Funny Animals books in the 1950s. Flippity and Flop, which ran for 47 issues from 1951 to 1960. Real Screen Comics, featuring the Fox and the Crow, that ran 128 issues from 1945 to 1959. And DC really transitioned from, as they started to transition out of superheroes kind of in the mid 40s, they did start to transition to some of these Funny Animals. Peter Panda, which ran 31 issues from 1953 to 1958. Leading Screen Comics, which had previously been Leading Comics. The first 14 issues of Leading Comics featured the 7 Soldiers of Victory, a superhero team that if you watch my channel at all, I'm a big fan of, and I have all 14 of those issues. And then with issue 45, with issue 45, it became Leading Screen Comics. And it was Funny Animals from issue 15 up. It ran 77 issues in total from 41 to 55. So this was near the end of the run for them. And Fox and Crow were not only in Real Screen Comics, they had their own book. And and that ran 108 issues from 52 to 68. Peter Porkchops, which is, he's kind of, I mean, he gets his name from like what he would become as a meal. That's kind of morbid for me. Anyway, Peter Porkchops ran 62 issues from 49 to 60. Raccoon Kids, previously had been Movie Town Animal Antics, ran up to issue 64 in 1957. And it was right around this time they renamed some of these what had been anthology titles into the names of the leading characters, including Dodo and the Frog, which had ran 92 issues through 1957, had previously been Funny Stuff. And Nutsy Squirrel had, with issue 61, became Nutsy Squirrel after previously been Hollywood Funny Folks. And all these title changes occurred in early 54. This ran through issue 72 in 1957. So all three of these kind of petered out in 1957. And then they had their crime stories. Now, DC's crime was like, you'll stand here, you can't beat the law. And this is a pre-code book. Also a TV and radio show, Gangbusters. That was a book that ran 67 issues from 47 to 59. None of their crime books were really SOTY books, really ran against the Comics Code. Big Town, which ran 50 issues from 1951 to 1958. It started as a radio series in the early 40s with Edward G. Robinson doing the vocals. It became a film in 1947, and there were a series of 3 more films in the series that followed very closely thereafter, and then a TV series. And then there was Mr. District Attorney, which ran 67 issues from 1948 to 1959. And I know Eggplant Comics, who is an attorney, but not a district attorney. I believe he's been collecting this run, or at least I know he was going down that path. And what's interesting is there aren't a lot of big keys in this time period. There was the first Ace and a couple, Angleman and the first Superman Batman team up, but not a lot of keys in these. And if you look like at Key Collector, a lot of times, these titles that ran for a long time, the superhero titles, especially the key books, you'll jump from like 1951 to 1956 or 58, because the Superman titles hadn't yet established that Superman mythos to extend his Kryptonian heritage, which you saw when Mort Reisinger really took over, introduced Supergirl and the Fortress of Solitude and the Bottle City of Candor and all those sorts of things. Then they had romance books. There was Girls' Romances, which ran 160 issues from 1950 through 1971. There was Girls' Love Stories, which ran 180 issues from 1949 to 1973. And as I'm collecting books from 72, there are a lot of romance books still out. And really that early to mid 70s period is when they started to see their final days. Secret Hearts, which ran 153 issues from 49 to 71. And it's the late 40s when Simon and Kirby really introduced the romance comic. And then DC had their sci-fi anthologies, which sometimes they were more later on, more horror-oriented. House of Mystery, which premiered in 1951 and ran for 321 issues through 1983. There was Mystery in Space, which premiered also in 1951. Which ran for 110 issues through 66. And then there was a 7-issue reboot that took it up to issue 117 in the early 80s. This looks to be, is that an Infantino cover? And then there was Strange Adventures. By this time, Captain Comet was no longer the headliner, but that started in 1950 and ran for 244 issues all the way through 1973. And, later on included first appearances of Animal Man and Dead Man. But Strange Adventures, I mean, you'd have to collect 244 issues to get the whole run. And then Westerns, as I said, were popular. All-Star Western, which had taken over the numbering with issue 58 from All-Star Comics, which started the Justice Society, And that was in 1951, as again, the superheroes were disappearing. That ran through issue 119 in 1961. This has the Trigger Twins. And the Westerns did have ongoing characters. Tomahawk, who previously had been in Star Spangled Comics. And this is, I don't know whether to consider this a war book or a Western book, because it's not really a Western. It takes place, I think, during the American Revolution. But Tomahawk lasted forever. That started in 1950, and it lasted for 140 issues all the way through 1972. And then there was Western Comics, which started in 1948 and ran for 85 issues through 1961. You can see here it stars Indian lawman Powwow Smith. It also had at other times Johnny Thunder and Nighthawk. Now, DC also around this time, for 12 years, they published a annual Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Christmas book. And then, in addition to The Brave and the Bold, DC did launch some new titles, all of which were very long running, all of which ran over 100 issues. And that was Our Fighting Forces, which first issue here, October, November of 54, and ran for 181 issues all the way through 1978. They introduced Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, here in September, October of 54. Yeah, I believe that's 54. And that ran all the way through 1974 for 163 issues. And then they kind of collapsed Lois Lane and Supergirl and Jimmy Olsen into one title, a giant Superman family, but it took over the numbering from Jimmy Olsen, and that ran through issue 222 in 1982. And then they added another sci-fi anthology in My Greatest Adventure, which got taken over. They introduced the Doom Patrol in issue 83. By issue 86 in 1964, Doom Patrol became the title of the book, and that ran through 1968 and issue 124. So I found it kind of interesting to look at that era of DC Comics. Again, Fawcett and Quality were both. Fawcett disappeared right in 1954, and Quality held on until 1956. And this is at the very end of the Golden Age, and right before DC completely reinvented themselves with Showcase number 4. But you can see that they were trying new things at the time. And they did have, they had a lot of funny animals. But they stuck with their books. I mean, you look at most of these books ran well over 100 issues. Even like the funny animal stuff and the Binky stuff was running into the late 60s and early 70s. And they were picking up some new titles. Jimmy Olsen started around this time. Lois Lane didn't get her own series until 1958, after a Showcase tryout, actually. Showcase would come, issue number 1 with Fireman Farrell would come in 1956. And, we have The Brave and the Bold, and Showcase and The Brave and the Bold both started to premiere those new heroes, The Flash, Green Lantern, Atom, that helped really invigorate DC during the Silver Age. And it was 5 years before Fantastic Four one came out that Flash came out. So DC really kind of set the precedent for Marvel to try superheroes. And that is fairly well-known story that, Stan Lee was doing all the monster stuff. And what's interesting too is, Atlas was doing the monster stuff. DC never did the monster stuff like that. They did the sci-fi in, House of Mystery, Strange Adventures. And DC doesn't have pre-code horror. They never went down that road. And I think they were trying to keep their brand to, the Superman kind of stuff. And they had successful funny animal stories. And they were doing, these movie adaptations like the Bob Hope and the Jerry Lewis Dean Martin stuff. And then the Date with Judy. So DC, they were publishing a lot of titles at the time. And they were one of the industry leaders. I think Disney was probably the industry leader at this time. But DC remained strong. And, these two books kind of encapsulate that time. Congo Bill Again, only ran for 7 issues in his own title, but as a character that was around forever. And even had his own movie serial. I should do an episode on comic book characters that had movie serials, because Black Hawk had his own, and Spy Smasher. So Captain Midnight. And then this Brave and the Bold. I had done that DC first appearances of the late Golden Age. This is 3 of those first appearances. And so, yeah, proud to add this to the collection. I am toying with the idea of probably not anything I'm going to do right now, but toying with, there's a little bit of staining on the back. I don't know if this would press out better, but I'm toying with the idea of either one of these, cracking them out, and maybe trying to submit them again. Because also I'd like to read them. I don't believe that DC has ever done a facsimile of Brave and the Bold #1. Let me look at that, because if not, they need to. I mean, it's not the sexiest book, but it is an important part of comic book history. And these, historical hero issues, that's never been, I'm going to put this into my CLZ account. So it's a 3.5. Date purchased. Yeah, this is kind of fun. I can actually put June 10th. Done. Whatnot. I like to whatnot. 410. CGC. Slabbed. Bam. And so that is a nice book to have in the collection. And I'm very happy with both of these books. So let me know what you think below. Have you collected any DC books from this era? I mean, people collect Batman and Superman and the superhero titles, but what about the other stuff? Do you have any of that? Have you come across any of it? It's stuff that isn't out there in great abundance, because it's so old. But fun stuff to get. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for stopping by. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.